Hi everyone, if I could have your attention please. We're just about ready to get started for our Agri-Food 1 session. If anyone's looking for Physics 101, you're in the wrong room. Pleased to introduce the panel for this afternoon, kicking things off. Seated immediately to my right is Paul Mayers, Associate Vice President for Programs and Policy at the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. To my left, Parthy Muthukumaraswamy, who's the Acting Director for Meat Programs at CFIA. And to his left, Mary Stanley, who's Director of the Office of Policy and Programs Development at the Food Safety Inspection Service. Phil Durfler, just seated off to our right of the Food Safety Inspection Service as well. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the panelists to kick things off.
Okay, thanks Samir, and Phil, if you join us up here so you can handle the hard questions. I'm just going to start first of all by thanking all of you for being here, and I'm very much looking forward to a bit of a dynamic discussion to kick off the series of discussions around agriculture items, starting with the equivalence of meat safety systems and the meat and poultry product export certification in this particular block. We are starting a little bit late given the late getting into the room, and so I'll leave to Samir to manage time for us and let us know when we have to wind this one up to move to the next discussion within the block. And so I'm going to ask the panelists in terms of the presentation to keep it relatively brief to allow time for the discussion, because I'm sure you're here for the discussion. But there is important information for them to share with you. They've been introduced, and so I'm not going to reintroduce them, but instead I'm going to turn over to Parthy and Mary to kick us off.
Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon, bonjour. We are going to talk about equivalence as well as certification today. We are going to share the presentation. Mary is going to present the certification part, and I'm going to present the equivalence part. In terms of RCC related items, there are three initiatives related to meat and poultry. As you know, one is equivalence, the second one is the certification, and the third is meat nomenclature. About meat nomenclature, we'll have further in-depth discussion at 4:30 today. I believe it is in the same room here. With respect to equivalence, CFIA and FSIS are working together to achieve the outcome. The outcome for the equivalence project is to streamline the requirements and simplify associated administrative procedures for products produced for exports to Canada from the United States, as well as for products produced for exports to U.S. from Canada. While there were some challenges in the beginning to make progress on this file, mostly because it took us more time to develop the mechanism to how to work on this and scope the project. But now the work is clearly underway, and we are making significant progress in the last few months.
Just wait 1 second.
It's not working. Okay. Samir's going to dive in.
Okay.
So I think it's on the next slide.
Okay, I'm going to the progress update slide. And CFIA and FSIS have made progress on completing a side-by-side comparison of Canadian and U.S. meat and poultry safety inspection systems. By that, we went over all the requirements between Canada and U.S., starting from HACCP, sanitation, you name it. We went one by one from post-mortem inspection to ante-mortem inspection to compare and see where commonalities are there and where differences are. It took a long time. As Rory mentioned this morning, this is significant work in terms of comparison. It's not just comparing one or two policies, but it's comparing the whole requirements between both countries. Canada and U.S. also completed audits of each other's meat inspection system, one in 2012 by U.S. and 2013 by Canada. What we are finding is Canadian and U.S. systems are equivalent, although there are some areas where differences exist. and these differences are currently being managed through additional export requirements imposed on each other. What we are trying to achieve here is to look at each other's export requirements, which is above and beyond their domestic requirements, to see if we can simplify and streamline some of those. And in addition, what we are doing right now is identifying some key areas of differences, if possible, and try to resolve that as fast as possible. If you are able to bridge the gaps between these differences, additional export requirements won't be necessary. Next slide, please. In terms of action items, on a range of issues of mutual interest, CFIA and FSIS terms of reference serves as a foundation for our continued engagement on meat and poultry issues and will help shape discussions on future alignment mechanisms within CFIA and FSIS. Next slide, please. In terms and FSIS has committed to complete the side-by-side comparison by fall 2013. The goal of this review is to identify and eliminate redundant requirements on both sides, and harmonization of requirements where possible. The reason we are saying where possible is, as was discussed this morning, there's a lot of legal requirements, regulations, and standards that need to be taken into consideration, and we are taking all that into consideration when we are trying and align both the requirements. I'll turn it on to my colleague Mary Stanley to talk about the certification project.
Thank you, and we're on slide number 9. The overview of the initiative for the certification project that we have undertaken under RCC is the objective is to reduce or eliminate the redundant certification requirements, the data elements, as well as the administrative procedures that are undertaken for the shipments flowing between the two countries. And so we recognize that there is an integrated nature between the equivalence work that we're doing as well as the relationship to the certification that we're requiring. And so we're working towards that objective to reduce or eliminate any outdated, unnecessary, or redundant certification. So the next slide on the update of the progress that we're making. The action item is to streamline and eliminate the certification requirements. And we've done a joint exercise with CFIA and FSIS to take a look at the procedures that we have undertaken over the years in regards to certifying products and identifying the areas where these could be simplified. Certainly, we're working towards eliminating unnecessary processes as well as any unnecessary requirements. One of the areas of opportunity that we're working towards is the pre-clearance process for the FSIS export certificates. And at this point, that procedure still stands, but there will be mechanisms taken under consideration for progress in moving away from that in the future. We also have a significant initiative that's related to the requirement of veterinary signatures on the public health certificates that are moving between the countries. And there's some activities that have been undertaken with the implementation of our public health information system, where we have a proposed rule that is changing the approach that FSIS takes on our public health certificates. And as well, that will provide some opportunities for simplification of the certificate that accompanies Canadian products into the U.S. And then on the U.S. side, for the products that are going up into Canada, there is continuing to be a requirement for veterinary signatures, and we're working very closely to address that issue as well. One of the things that has created some challenges as we've gone through the regulatory requirements is there is an animal health implication there that is a regulatory requirement on the APHIS side. And so that does have impact on any progress that we make on the veterinary signature side. So we're working very closely with Animal Plant Health Inspection Service. The next slide would be the next steps and key issues. We're obviously continuing these discussions between CFIA and FSIS, engaged with APHIS. But I did want to emphasize the collaboration that is ongoing on the initiatives between both countries on electronic certification. This is really a key area where we are making some progress. We're sharing a lot of information between the two governments at this point in regard to system specs, specifications, and engaging at the IT level so that we can benefit from the lessons learned as we've implemented electronic certification, capturing data elements, and as we move forward with developing an electronic system. And Canada is in about the same place in regard to the development of an eCert system. The emphasis here is the fact that we are leveraging work that's been done on the international level using international standards, UN CFECT data specifications, which will facilitate the process. And then we're also leveraging the efficiencies that our customs and agencies are doing in regard to the single window. And so that's a very important element. So as those new functionalities come into play on both sides of the border, we're taking those into consideration, and that will translate to more efficiencies along the electronic certification area.
Thank you. Current collaboration is a good foundation for future work and provides a starting point for deeper regulatory cooperation. And when we talk about RCC and BTB with FSIS, there's also a number of other bilateral issues that's been discussed, and it's serving as a good foundation for us in terms of resolving a lot of issues, as well as in terms of developing future strategic ideas together. Your input is definitely very helpful for us, and we are looking forward for your input and any questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both for that. And so we are in your hands and look forward to your comments, questions. And they are microphones, and so have at it.
If you have a question, just raise your hand, and you can probably hear me without the mic, but in any case, raise your hand and we can mic you.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your presentations. Bill Weston, American Media Institute. As you know, we've had our NAFTA Regulatory Cooperation Working Group going for 2 years now, and I noticed you mentioned e-certification as something you're making progress on. And the last time we talked about this, you thought, or CFIA thought, that it would be a couple of years yet before that you would be able to get that module going. I just wanted to see if you're able to move that timetable up to be compatible with PHIS, or what the situation is. So thank you.
I can answer that. Government of Canada invested $100 million for modernization in 2011 for CFIA. Specifically, part of that money is going towards infrastructures for e-certification. There's a number of discussions that's currently being held between CFIA and FSIS in terms of implementing some of that. But our goal at this time is 2016 for electronic certification. But it's going to be on phases, so we don't know where the meat will stay. But CFIA, as you probably know, also regulates animal health, plant health, as well as food safety and all commodities for food. So 2016 time frame is what we are expecting for all e-certification. And what we are doing right now is learning some lessons from PHIS so that we don't repeat the same mistakes and move forward as quickly as possible. There was a team from CFIA, IMIT, this week meeting with FSIS, IMIT people to understand the infrastructure and the background. So I think it's going progressively well, and from FSIS side, maybe Mary can add more, but FSIS is also looking at e-certification from US to Canada, and we are working in terms of able to receive that electronic certification. So we need to invest some money in terms of able to accept it. So that's what we are working on currently.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add to that is the PHIS system on the inbound side. When Canada stands up their eCert system, we would be able to receive that. We've demonstrated that already with 2 countries and a third one in the works. And then we're also developing an electronic export certification module within the public health information system that is ongoing work at this point.
Thank you.
Rory McAlpine. I think it's a question for Party. Of course, in Canada, it was mentioned we've got the new Safe Food for Canadians Act, and the regulations now are going to be developed under that, including the meat, whether the horizontal, but also the meat-specific regulations. So I guess the question would be, as you're doing this side-by-side, this equivalence comparison across all aspects of the meat inspection standards and inspection programs, is it going to be in a place where the gaps or the differences are clearly identified such that as we're now developing the new Canadian regulations, to the extent that we can bring them in line based on our side, is that going to come together this fall as we go through this?
Exactly, Rory, that's the intent here. But at this time, because we don't have the new regulations, although we have a framework that we have put out for consultation, so we are working with our current regulations and current act. But we will be, as we are working together, as I mentioned before, our collaboration here is continuous, and we have been talking to a lot of FSIS staff related to regulations and others on our modernization initiative, and our goal is to align all of that as we move forward step by step. And definitely there is an intent to connect with the new regulations and also the inspection modernization, because that is also going to change as a result of the modernization initiatives. Definitely that thinking is already there, and we will take one step at a time, and when the new one comes in, we will definitely take into consideration. But there is, as you said, there is opportunity for us to adjust some of our requirements based on this exercise of equivalence, because it's a good opportunity in Canada for us, while we are rewriting our regulations, we need to make any changes, it can all go at the same time. Yes.
Further questions, comments up here at the front, please?
I think this may be a little bit redundant, but as part of the working group's activities last year, we had put together a draft reciprocal microbial testing proposal, so that microbial testing on both sides of the board be acceptable to each side. Maybe that's part of what you just answered, but since we were very specific about that proposal, and at the time, I believe CFIA said, well, we weren't quite ready to do that with FSIS, so I wanted to see if there was any discussion or further progress on that proposal. Thank you.
At this time, the microbial testing, in terms of if you are talking about the methodology, that would be equivalent between ourselves. At this time, we are doing it one by one. There were a few methods that were submitted for FSIS, and together it was evaluated and found to be equivalent. I believe there was one that was approved for listeria a few weeks, 2 or 3 weeks ago. But we are doing one at a time, but we are not looking at all the methodologies at this time together. But maybe in the future, after we first finish the side-by-side and have some broader ideas, we'll talk in detail about the methodologies and how we can align those two methodologies.
Other comments and questions for the panel?
Hi, Chris Waldrop, Consumer Federation of America. There is, I know Canada and the U.S. are considering a pilot program that would allow shipments from Canada to be shipped directly to the U.S. Where does that fit in with this, with what you've presented today?
The initiative that you're referring to doesn't fall under the regulatory cooperation initiative. It falls under the Beyond the Border initiative. And it's important to understand that with respect to that proposal, it is, as was noted in the panel discussion earlier this morning, about avoiding congestion and inefficiency at the border. It's not about changing the oversight model. And so it's about product progressing to destination for inspection as opposed to stopping at the border for inspection. But it is outside of this initiative because it's a Beyond the Border initiative.
Okay, Jen, just from a consumer group perspective in the U.S., there are food safety concerns that we've brought forward, so it's not just about congestion from our perspective. we think there are some food safety elements as well.
Yeah, no, and I can appreciate that, and that's why I made the point that I made, because it doesn't change the oversight model at all. It just shifts where that initial point of inspection occurs. It in no way moves to an approach where a product isn't inspected. And so that's important to understand with the initiative, that it is not an initiative about product going direct to the marketplace in the U.S. Without the oversight of USDA.
And sorry, just to follow up, border inspection does serve a purpose, and consumer groups, it serves a purpose in terms of confidence for consumers. It also serves a purpose in terms of catching food safety problems at the border. I understand it's a pilot project. I understand that it's still details are still being worked out. But just, to make that point, since you're saying it's just about congestion, I wanted to make that point that, we see value in that inspection at the border and what happens there.
And go ahead, Phil.
Well, let me just say, a lot of what we're doing through this process, or the equivalents that they talked about and some of the other things, is to get a better understanding of each other's system, without regard to specific measures, but to get a better understanding of each other's system, to get more and more confidence in each other's system, so that ultimately where there are commonalities, we can facilitate movement of product, but also where there are not commonalities, we'll be aware of that and we'll deal with them appropriately. The important thing is, while we want to find commonalities and we want to facilitate the movement of process, we will not do anything that's going to compromise food safety. And so whatever we do, ultimately we are committed to food safety, and we will ensure that what we're doing is maintaining the safety of the product that's coming across the border. So let me just say that.
Okay, thank you. I see a hand at the back.
Yes, my name is Suzanne Sabo. I'm with the Canadian Meat Council. I just wanted to address the point that was made by the gentleman from the Consumers Association of the United States and reinforce the point made by our CFIA officials. Even though it's not an RCC initiative, the Beyond the Border initiative is not, as Paul indicated, to change the oversight function. And we take the view that with the inspection at the border, it does run the risk of compromising food safety. And I think the example that Rory gave this morning in his presentation is an indication of the types of issues and problems that we can encounter. So I just wanted to throw out there for the record to say that we view things differently north of the 49th parallel. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so just looking at the time and recognizing, oh, I'm sorry, I do see another hand. It's a long room, so do make sure that you're seen if you have a question.
Tony Corbo from Food and Water Watch. I understand there have been a couple of incidents where dried cured meats have been stopped at the border, imports of Canadian dried meat goods because of listeria concerns. Is this one of the issues that you're trying to address in terms of the listeria standards?
Well, given the question, I'm going to turn to our USDA colleagues first to respond, but I will note that the reality is that there are products that are stopped at the border in both directions as part of the oversight model. That is an occurrence that is frankly part of the inspection model that occurs on a monthly basis. And so around the specific issue raised, Mary or Phil, I would propose that you start off.
Okay, thank you. And Tony, when you say that it's, is it something that we're taking under consideration to the RCC? Absolutely. Listeria testing, the zero tolerance that FSIS applies is a measure that we have in place and is a requirement that Canada, as well as all countries, comply with. And so the testing that is conducted through our import inspection procedures there is a commitment now and will continue to be a commitment of having a monitoring sampling program at the border or through our port of entry inspection procedures to verify the effectiveness of the procedures that are in place under the Canadian inspection system. So yes, we are taking that into consideration as we review the regulations and the procedures in place. That's part of that assessment and will be taken into under consideration as we move forward.
Thank you, Mary.
Parthy, did you want to speak to product moving north?
Well, it's the same thing. For products moving north, we do also have a similar program in terms of testing, and we do that's why we are talking here about equivalence on both sides, not on one side product coming from north to south. So, and we do have an inspection program, import inspection program that verifies that product coming up north are also equally safe. And having said that, we both are working together, and Listeria and other equivalents are also part of the RCC equivalence project.
Okay, thank you. Other comments or questions? Yes?
One question about the involvement of Health Canada, I guess, Paul or Parthy, like in terms of the issues at play here in terms of standards, food safety standards, when we're talking about equivalence, and you know, the issues I was discussing about MRLs, there's a whole piece of that that has to do with Health Canada, and yet I'm not sure, is Health Canada part, and maybe FDA is relevant here, but I don't think so. I think it's really just USDA on the US side, but is Health Canada part of this equivalence assessment and process?
Not at this time, Rory. I think at this time what we are looking at is each other's Meat Inspection Act and regulations that we each other deliver here. Health Canada is not part of the equivalence project at this time, but when we identify some differences that I was talking about, we will take it back to our partners to discuss those differences and see how we can align those differences. But it's the responsibility of CFIA as a lead for Canada for this project to take it back to the partners and discuss with them and see how we can align them.
So just to clarify a little bit, in the U.S., FDA is the standard-setting organization for residues, and we enforce the tolerances and the standards that they establish. So, I mean, even though they're not part of this project either, I mean, to the extent that we're discussing residues, we're involving them and discussing things with them on an ongoing basis.
So it would work similarly on both sides as gaps or differences are identified. Thank you. I don't see any requests for the floor. All right. So if we've exhausted questions and comments as it relates to these two, if I could turn to the panelists for wrap-up remarks with respect to the next steps going forward.
I'll start off maybe. Thank you, Paul, and we are definitely working more closer over this project, but I wanted to just leave a point here. Food safety is definitely on top of our priority, on top of our minds from both sides, and that is why it is taking longer time than it normally would take when food safety is not involved. So when we are dealing with this, we are taking food safety as a criteria and we are going one step at a time and looking at it closely. That's why we're not changing anything drastically and we are looking at it closely.
And just to echo what Parthy has said, the complexity of our regulations and the complexity of the products that we regulate encourages us to take a comprehensive, robust approach to this, because we certainly don't want to set up a situation where we change one thing that has a negative impact as we're moving forward. So taking the time, the front end of this initiative, to do this deep dive into regard to the comprehensive assessment of the regulations on both sides of the border, I think will have tremendous payback as we progress.
It's up to you. You can go first.
No.
Okay, first of all, I want to say thank you to the Canadians. They hosted the meetings that we had yesterday, and they've taken the lead in a lot that we've had today. They hosted the meetings this morning, so we want to express our appreciation to them. Second, I want to thank everybody that's here. Thank you for your interest and your attention. Let me just close by saying, essentially, we have equivalent systems. We've each done an audit recently, as was pointed out before, but we have confidence basically in each other's system. But that confidence is reinforced by verification. Sometimes the verification that we do is inconvenient. I think this morning there was a discussion about residue testing. Certainly, we don't claim that we have all the answers. We're open, we're looking at our program, we're trying to make sure that we can accomplish the things that we want to accomplish with the minimum disruption, but ultimately the bottom line is we have to ensure the safety. So what we want to do is we trust and we verify. And that's really the key to understanding the relationship between the two countries. Thank you.
Thank you all. And let me close by first noting the value that this initiative has brought in terms of strengthening the relationship between both organizations and ramping up the regular dialogue, which is tremendously beneficial, but as well challenging us, as noted, to really look for solutions where there are differences, while still respecting that commitment that exists on both sides to the protection of citizens, which is and will remain critical in the process. And so I would note that this is not just about CFIA and FSIS, because the stakeholders' contribution to this process remains critical. And I'd encourage all of you to continue to be engaged around the initiative, and we will certainly reach out and engage you as we continue to work forward. So I look forward to your continued contribution to helping to shape it. I also want, of course, to thank you for your engagement with this particular block of discussion. We are going to shift gears, and I'm going to turn back at this point to Samir. But first, let me invite you to join me in thanking the panel.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks again to the panelists. We are now moving to the CFIA and APHIS portion of the session, which will be about zoning for foreign animal diseases and the perimeter approach to plant protection.
No, you do. Oh, you okay. I know your name, Tom.
Oh.
I don't have the young lady at the end of the table.
Kelly Rhodes.
Rhodes?
R-H-O-D-E-S.
And she's
with my
APHIS.
Yeah.
Great. I'll just let the couple of folks who are coming in settle, and then we're going to dive right in. Oh, that's all right. Okay, well, again, so shifting gears to zoning for foreign animal diseases and to the perimeter approach to plant protection. And joining me for this, on my immediate left, Thomas Myers from USDA APHIS, Cheryl James from Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and Kelly Rhodes also from APHIS. And so I'm going to immediately turn over to you in terms of the presentation.
All right, thank you, Paul. So I'll do a brief introduction of this project, and then I'll turn it over to Cheryl and Kelly, and I really want to thank both of them because they've done the lion's share of the work on this project. We in the U.S. and Canada both have an abiding interest in assuring that both countries are protected from foreign animal diseases. Can we go ahead a couple of slides?
Oh, you've
Here
got
we
the
go.
clicker.
I've got it.
Oh,
Which
this
one?
That.
This one?
No, that one.
No,
Oh,
that-
you just turned it off.
No.
There we go.
There we go. All right.
Well, you push all the buttons, eventually one of
I'll
them's
get the right
gonna
one
work.
eventually. So, of course, we share our interest in protecting each of our countries from foreign animal diseases, but we challenged ourselves with the question of if a foreign animal disease were to occur in either one of our countries, what are we able to do, since there is such a significant amount of trade between our two countries? What could we do to assure that for those areas of the country that are not affected by such a disease, that bilateral trade can resume as quickly as possible? And so we have been working on that project for the last number of months. And in order to tackle that question, we took the time to evaluate each other's systems and did a formal evaluation of the veterinary infrastructure that we have and the zoning procedures that we have within each country. And as a result of that evaluation, felt that there was very good alignment in how we respond to foreign animal diseases, how we create zones and have systems in place to establish, maintain, and release those disease control and eradication zones. And so based on that bilateral review of our respective systems, we were able to develop and sign an arrangement mutually recognizing those zoning decision mechanisms. And so this past October, the two chief veterinary officers of the U.S. and Canada got together and signed that document indicating our intention for each country to recognize each other's zoning decisions in the event that a foreign animal disease outbreak was to occur. As an outgrowth of signing that arrangement, then we began developing a more detailed framework on how to implement that arrangement, and that's where I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl to talk about the work that she and Kelly and their group have been doing since October to develop that framework for implementation.
Okay. Thank you, TJ. We have been working closely together for the last several months and developing this guidance framework. We have a team at USDA APHIS and one at CFIA. We meet regularly by conference call. And what we're looking at is putting together those high-level processes that are needed in order for recognition of zoning decisions to happen. So basically the arrangement we signed was the what. What are we going to do? And the guidance framework is how are we going to do it? Now this document is, we're not intending for it to be a prescriptive document or a very lengthy checklist. It's really more about looking at who has the authority to recognize the zones and at what point do we recognize zones and at what point do we recognize the zones are free, how do we communicate during an outbreak, and how do we both stay on top. At a time when you have an outbreak, resources are really stretched very, very tight. So essentially this is about laying out all those processes in advance of an outbreak so that we have an idea of how we're going to proceed. So we're looking to complete a draft by midsummer of this year. We are doing this internally first between APHIS and CFIA. Our feeling was that we need to get things straight between ourselves first to fully understand how we would like to proceed before we take it outside. However, we are planning in the fall. Let's move on to the next slide. Did I hit the right button?
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
It didn't do
I
anything.
didn't.
There you go.
Okay, well, there was a slide we skipped, but it's okay. I think you've seen
Yeah.
it before, so I don't
It's
think we have a need to to look at that one again. But our next steps are, we are going to move out to external stakeholder consultation probably in October of this year. I'd like to emphasize that the draft that we're putting together is not a done deal by any means. This truly requires a lot of stakeholder input. We need to also have input with provinces and state CVOs. A big part of this is about that we all have the same understanding of what we're doing and why we're doing it, and understanding all the science that underlays that. So it's really important that we have good input from everybody that's involved. So the document itself, including that document, is we will have processes for how to change that document, and we tend to take that guidance framework out and do some workshops, some scenario building, some foreign animal disease exercises, activities like that, so that we can see how it functions, and then we'll have an opportunity to change it if changes are necessary. So we hope to have the framework adopted, or this version of the framework adopted, sometime within the first quarter of 2014. And in terms of pilot projects and cross-border initiatives, which would engage external parties as well as CFIA and APHIS, depending on resources, and I guess that's kind of a big issue these days, but depending on resources, we would foresee starting some of those activities as early as this fall. And that's all I had to say.
Okay, thanks, Cheryl. And so, Samir, I need your guidance. Shall we take the questions related to the zoning and then shift to the plant? I think, if not, it's going to get awfully crowded up here. Okay, so let's invite comments and questions on the zoning for foreign animal diseases, and then we'll quickly then shift into the perimeter approach for plant protection. Okay. I can see you walking back, but I can't tell if you're walking back towards someone or just walking. Okay. All right. That's always a good thing. If there are no questions, we don't have to force a question. No? Okay. So then, again, if I invite you to join me in thanking the panel, and we will switch to plant protection. Thanks, guys. That was painless. Okay, so as we change gears, just quick introductions. Immediately to my left is Brian Double of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Next to him, John Grafer, I hope I pronounced that correctly, from APHIS, and Terry Donahue Dunahee,
Yes, thanks.
also from APHIS. It's important to pronounce names correctly, and I always make a botch of it, but anyway. And so, again, in the interest of time, I'm going to turn right over to you with the presentation.
Okay, I guess also in the interest of time, I'll give the presentation, but just to mention that we developed it together. So how do I work this?
Yeah, that one.
So I'll talk about an overview of the initiative, discuss a progress update, talk about the next steps, the process for ongoing alignment work, finally the next steps and key questions, key issues, and then open it up for questions and comments. So the whole initiative is basically, the objective is to develop a partnered approach to plant protection between Canada and the U.S. to minimize impediments to bilateral trade and maximize protection of the North American plant resource base. Some of the things that would fall under that would be equivalency of regulatory measures with a focus on risks presented to North America from offshore origins, coordinating, collaborating on this endeavor, and then the facilitation of trade between Canada and the United States. There's 3 action items under this initiative. The first one is developing a framework. So this is an actual document that is intended to be the operational plan for perimeter, for cooperation on the perimeter. It's how APHIS and CFI intend to work together to identify issues and work through them. And a key component to this is stakeholder engagement. And as such, CFI will be launching a joint stakeholder consultation on this framework, and I look forward to your input this summer on the framework and on future projects. The second action item is essentially a pilot under this framework. So we developed the framework and tested it out immediately. So the first one is on chrysanthemum white rust, and with respect to coordinating our approach to regulatory oversight. So kind of the current status of it is both CFIA and Canadian stakeholders, as well as numerous other stakeholders, submitted comments to the United States advance notice on proposed rulemaking on chrysanthemum white rust. The comment period closed November 30th, 2012, and the U.S. is still in the process of reviewing those comments. The second pilot is with respect to a greenhouse certification program. This is a long-standing program that needed some clarification, revisions, and designed to increase plant phytosanitary protection for both the United States and for Canada. Now, a little bit about ongoing alignment. We heard this morning and yesterday about the next phases of RCC going towards ongoing alignment work. And in plant health, we've been moving towards that already with this framework. So the framework provides a good starting point for deeper regulatory cooperation. It's been exploratory in nature. We're trying to see what works. That's why we did the 2 pilots. And we're currently focused on meeting the deliverables of the current RCC projects, as well as assessing the lessons learned from the 2 pilots, as well as it will be the comments you provide us on the framework. So it still says that. So we're not quite ready to launch the consultation in June, but it will be this summer. So we'll be launching it this summer for your input. The intention is that we'll analyze the input and have finalized the framework and be developing a work plan in our inaugural meeting of the steering committee in October. With respect to the specific pilots, again, with chrysanthemum white rust, it's working towards aligning our chrysanthemum white rust regulatory requirements And with the greenhouse certification program, we're looking for joint consultation on the draft greenhouse certification program in this summer as well. So just to conclude, I'm looking forward to your comments on the framework and on the pilots, and look forward to any questions or comments that you have right now.
Okay, thank you. And before we turn to questions and comments, John, Terry, any comments before we do that?
Yeah, just a couple of points of emphasis with the presentation Brian just did. And that is that this is, about stakeholder, getting stakeholder input and perspectives here. And I really, even in this room, I'm curious to ask how many here are coming from a plant protection standpoint and interested in this particular area. I see Michelle and okay, a few back there. Okay,
there's
good.
A few hands
good.
Back there.
So, yeah, that's good. We were a little scared earlier this morning that there wasn't anyone here to kind of challenge us on what we were doing in plant health. So, but anyway, I urge you on the two things that Brian went through. One is on the pilots. These are going to be winding down at some point, and like any pilot, the purpose of them is to really try to find out what the lessons are, what works, what doesn't, what needs to be improved. So we're going to be looking at it from a regulatory standpoint in terms of, from our perspective, but it's really critical that stakeholders on the other side of this are also taking a look and offering up their observations. And that's going to be what helps us build, as we move forward, to inform our next steps around it. The other is what Brian mentioned about this framework around a perimeter, North American perimeter approach. And that too, we're going to be simultaneously getting this out for stakeholder review this summer. We hope to get it out either at the end of this month, end of June, or early July. And we'll be doing it through the APHIS stakeholder registry, not putting it in the Federal Register. So again, we'll be probably trying very hard to make sure that we notify the normal folks that are part of our network in the plant health to be sure they do take a look at it, because we do want that framework to be an effective one. It'll be, for us, be reinforcing and deepening the cooperation we already have. I think we have quite a history of it. And so, again, urging those that are in the room here with plant protection interests to, be on the lookout for those documents and opportunities. So.
Well, thank you for that. Let's throw it open for your questions and comments. I see a couple hands up, and microphones will be making their way to you shortly. Please.
Michel-Antoine Renaud from the Canadian Ornamental Horticulture Alliance. Thank you, Brian, John, and Terry. You were talking about lessons learned, and I want to hear from the three of you, what are those lessons learned through this process? Because one thing we've seen is that there are delays on what we were expecting as a group and when we put in the RCC plan. So there's probably things that we can learn together, and I haven't had that feedback yet, in particular on the chrysanthemum white rust. That's taking much longer than we were expecting. And GCP, that's actually aligned with what we thought. So, thanks.
Well, I don't know. I'm not. Well, I mean, to be honest, I think it's still too early for us. We haven't had a chance to have that internal discussion yet about lessons learned. I mean, I think both of the pilot projects are taking longer than we had hoped, both the greenhouse program and the chrysanthemum white rust. And maybe that's just, as we dig into the, regulations always take a long time, or changes, the process. We have to go through the process. For the greenhouse project, which is the one I've been most involved with, I think the technical side of it was more complicated than what we had originally anticipated as we dug into it. So I don't think we're ready yet to answer the questions of what we've learned from the process that's going to lead to informing future alignment. I think we're going to have those conversations, but I don't know, Brian, if you have anything, but I don't think we're quite ready to have that conversation yet. We haven't discussed it much. We're still learning.
Yeah, no, I agree. We haven't had the conversation yet, but perhaps one of the things there is being realistic about timelines. is regulatory process does take a long time, but it's certainly helpful to decide what you're going for and then proceed there together. And I think that's what we've been doing with both of these projects. So I'm not sure if it's a lesson learned or just something that we already knew.
Thanks.
If I can just add one thing here. I think Terry and Brian it is premature still to analyze all this. I mean, we're not there yet, but I do think the observation so far has been that resources really do matter. And that's the one thing that's been evident is that we are forced into really being clear about our priorities. And I think this framework will allow for that to have mutual priorities, because the resources for doing this work are not enlarging, they're shrinking. So I think that's the one lesson I see just in the last 2 years and going into this.
Very good point.
I think those are two valid lessons, actually, because the expectations on the industry are really high, and we're expecting those timelines to be met. But we don't see that yet. But I think those are two good lessons to bring back, resources and expectations. Thanks.
Well, and one of the things that I might add, which for me isn't a lesson, but just listening to my colleagues here, is as regulators, one of the things we have to do is be more pragmatic with our stakeholders around their expectations because of issues like the complexity of reg making, just so that stakeholders have a deeper appreciation for that complexity and therefore the time that it takes and the resource implications. And these processes help us recognize that at the front end, we need to give stakeholders a better appreciation of what it's going to take to work through the issues. I did see another hand at the back.
Yes, Lynn Schmalley with the Society of American Florists, representing the greenhouse industry and floriculture industry in the United States. We are applauding you for doing this work. I know you're working hard on it. This is great. Just listening to the very brief comments that you made, and we have been watching this for some time, I hope that we are not moving toward a situation where the governments get together in internal discussions that can't be shared with the industry. We're not ready to share with the industry yet is a refrain that we kind of continue to hear. And just as regulatory processes are complex and take time to develop and take resources, business planning also is complex and takes time to develop and takes resources. So that I hope that this conversation that we're referring to ends up being a real conversation as opposed to something where the regulators, the governments, put something out on the table, ask for industry comment, and then go back behind closed doors again, analyze industry comment, and come out with a final process. I really would like to see some back and forth conversation on these issues, which are tremendously important to our industry and our government. Certainly, John and Terry are well aware of that, I know. So that's what we're hopeful of.
Yeah, excellent points, and thank you for making that. And of course, they're not limited to these issues. They extend across the entire regulatory framework, the importance of an iterative, open process with stakeholders. And it is critical to recognize that the approach can't be that we come out the door with something that's fully baked, but that we engage you in the preparatory process. And I think that's the intent of the stakeholder engagements that were noted in the presentation.
Yeah, the document you see is not going to be fully baked, so you'll have plenty of time. And I think we're planning to have a lot of opportunities for engagement when we share that document, which we're hoping will be fairly soon.
Yeah. And for
the greenhouse program.
Sorry, Terry. We really would like you to see you come out the door with something that's half-baked. I think that would be great.
We'll take that as intended. Thanks.
Lynn, I think you raised, super legitimate points here. Terry and I were talking earlier this morning about how is it that we would network, and we were thinking that for us, at least in the plant health area, the North American Plant Protection Organization, the industry advisory group there is a little more available network for us to use. And it may be that we come back to you, Lynn, for your help in figuring out how do we involve a lot of your colleagues And so we're sure that we are reaching out to the right folks at the right time to have these talks, you know, at the beginning, in the process, not at the end of it.
So-
Sure, that'd be great.
And one other point I'd like to make a little bit to follow up on the sessions this morning, and I'm not sure who was all at the session this morning, but your particular industry, Lynn, the nursery industry, was not represented as one of the panels during the forum this morning, but I think the type of feedback we got there was, I think, very helpful with the other sectors, and I think we'll be looking for that kind of input from your industry as we move forward on the RCC big picture as new projects and for input on mechanisms for further alignment. So I'm sure we'll be talking to you more about that and really encourage you to respond to the Federal Register notice when that comes out fairly soon, I guess, right? Thanks.
Thank you. I see another hand.
I'm Larry Nichols. I'm here representing the National Plant Board, which is, if you're not familiar with it, National Plant Board is an organization of state plant regulatory officials, and we're responsible for regulating the movement of plant material, both intrastate and to a certain degree interstate. And just a comment, our one concern is that is regarding the movement of plant material that might come in from a third country. So it starts in a third country, ends up, say, goes to Canada for a period of time, and then is free to move into the U.S. when we might have in the U.S. restrictions against that particular plant material coming from that third country. So anyway, that's just a concern that we would like to see addressed. So thanks.
Can I? Yeah. So Larry, one comment I would make is that I think one of the reasons that the revision of the greenhouse program in particular has been a longer process than we had originally anticipated is that, you know, the program's been ongoing since 1996, right. But the trade has changed quite a bit over the years, and a lot more material is coming in from third countries. And so what we're trying to do is revise the greenhouse program to make sure that it takes into account factors like products coming in from third countries and the large number of products that are moving between the U.S. and Canada. And so that is a major factor for us. I mean, we're very aware of the issue, and it's, I think, one of the issues that is making the revision a bit of a more difficult process than we thought, because we want to make sure we have all those protections in place, but still allow appropriate trade to continue.
Okay, good. Thank you.
But thank you for your comment.
Yeah, I did want to echo that the origin is a very important issue for phytosanitary certification, and we're very aware that commodities come in from other countries and then are moved between our two countries, and that is something that we're definitely trying to address. We were trying to address it before the RCC, but it provides more emphasis with the RCC to address that and address it properly.
Thank you. We've got time for one last question before we wind up, if there is one last question. If not, your timing as an audience was perfect. All right. Well, so what I'd like to do is just give each of my colleagues an opportunity for a brief wrap-up comment, if they have one.
Let me yeah, I mean, for us, you know, the cooperation with Canada is probably one of the most important cooperations we have in the world, and I think half of what we do internationally outside of North America, you know, really couldn't get done without that coalition that the two countries have. And so it isn't about, it's in addition to being about what goes on at our own internal border, more and more with global trade, it's going to be how we handle challenges from other regions like Asia, and where we have a lot of issues around new pest reservoirs and unknown pest situations. And so the framework that we're talking about here is going to really be important for just kind of that, just strengthening that relationship we'll encounter, you know, deal with the future there. And we hope as with the confidence and the and working towards what we've learned from these pilots and doing more of that, we can have that mutual confidence on the internal trade that's so important. So I would just end it there. Thanks.
And I just wanted to underscore, I said it a few times in the presentation, but we definitely are looking forward to input on the framework and the future projects, and about also how you want to be engaged, when you want to be engaged, to help us better develop a better program here.
Thank you. And as the working group lead in this context, I really do want to commend both the folks working on the foreign animal disease and the folks working on plant protection. You know, they've really demonstrated what this initiative is about in terms of the collaboration that they've undertaken. They frankly have been focused not just on delivering projects, but really on delivering the relationship, and that really is quite commendable. I know how much hard work has gone into it, and so I'd invite you to join me in thanking them. And so with that, we're turning over to the crop protection folks, and I see them all assembled at the door.
Thank you, Paul. I'd like to call upon the folks from the Pest Management Regulatory Agency of Canada and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to take us through the crop protection products work plan.
You want to be close or Thank you.
Why don't you guys get on the end? Mary and I don't want to get in.
Yeah, just Mary's actually going to be up, right? She's going to be up giving the presentation. Where do you want?
She can't do it from here.
Mom, just tell us where we sit.
Sit there. Mary can sit here. Here's the clicker. She was it.
So instructions.
You probably should.
Instructions.
You probably should.
Instructions. We have to introduce ourselves, and then I'll just get into the presentation, and then we have to open the floor to questions. We don't need to, so that she can go.
She's going to be, are you going to get up to do?
No, there's no place to get up. Do you see a podium? There's a garbage can.
I'm sorry, you had to be quiet now.
Richard, things are bad enough.
What?
Get
Things are going on for bail.
I do all these wings.
I don't know. It's funny that.
And French coffee as if we need vote.
So we introduce ourselves?
We do. We do. And there's that big spotlight. It's hard to really see who's there. Well, it is, and some people stand, I think. Some people stand from the other.
Yeah.
Do you see Peter Hall? Peter Hall's sitting down there, and Peter wasn't coming. Went for a half an hour. Peter Hall
Sorry?
was at the reception. Where did he come? He went home? Oh, he said he did all the things he could do.
What's the drill? We'll just introduce ourselves and then do, in case there's...
I think we only have 3 This one.
Should be all right. We're probably ready to go. I don't know how we're doing here, but... You want me to just get their attention?
Yeah. Go, Richard.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. This next session is the Crop Protection Products Initiative. My name is Richard O'Coin. I'm the Executive Director of the Pest Management Regulatory Agency of Health Canada. I'm here with my colleagues, with my colleague from Health Canada, of course, and with colleagues from the US EPA. I'll just have them introduce themselves, and then we'll get right into what the nature of this initiative is and the progress we've made. So,
Good afternoon. I'm Marion Law and the Technical Lead on the Crop Protection Product Initiative. I'm Lois Rossi. I'm the Director of Registration in the Office of Pesticide Programs at the U.S. EPA, and I'm also the technical lead with Marion on the project.
And I'm Steve Bradbury. I'm the Director of the Pesticide Program at the Environmental Protection Agency and co-lead this effort with Richard Aucoin. And I believe Marion's going to give you all an overview of our status of efforts to date.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Steve. On behalf of the Pest Management Regulatory Agency of Health Canada, the Office of Pesticide Programs and the EPA, IR4, and the Pest Management Centre of Agri-Food and Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, I'm going to present the initiative on crop protection products. I'm going to move straight to slide number 3. I know most people are probably familiar with our action plan, but just as a reminder, the objective of this initiative was building on an already well-established pesticide joint review program of new chemical actives. We were taking this further to include the joint review of expanded use of already registered products and registering these expanded, usually minor use, at the same time establishing maximum residue limits, MRLs in the tolerance in the US, and thereby allowing domestic MRLs and import MRLs to be calculated at the same time as the use expansion. The key deliverables that we hope to achieve are to agree on the use of specific science approaches, the alignment of specific registration processes where appropriate, the development of shared registration application forms, templates, and electronic tools where possible. And those of you who are familiar with our work plan know that we developed 4 action plans, all interlinked in order to meet those objectives. If I can just move very briefly for a progress update on action item 1, which was the goal was to encourage joint submissions of use expansions, minor uses, and fully aligned labels. To date, we have successfully completed the pilot use expansion registration for an insecticide with a fair number of minor use crops. And this was all accomplished within the agreed timeline, which is important, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. The pilot resulted in harmonized maximum residue levels, tolerances, thus being able to eliminate potential trade barriers. And of course, the point of the pilot was not only to get the product registered and harmonize MRLs, but also to identify issues or challenges that would possibly stop us from doing this on an ongoing basis. Those were identified. We have resolved these to the extent that PMRA and EPA have agreed to use the same principles in ongoing joint review projects from now on. Moving on to action item number 2, the objective was to develop joint guidelines for residue field trials. The EPA and PMRA agreed on the joint use of residue trials for use expansions where possible. And of course, this links very much to the result of the pilot insecticide done under action item number 1. Moving forward towards the next few months, the agencies anticipate developing joint principles for a field trial guideline. We also agreed on the use of the proportionality concept to establish MRLs, mainly for minor uses, in certain cases. That's one of our aligned science approaches. And also, we will continue to work to develop harmonized crop groupings, resulting in the need for less residue data to support a greater number of crops. Action item number 3 was a large and very important action item, the goal of which was to address obstacles to joint registrations. We chose certain areas to focus. To date, what we have done is completed an analysis of regulatory timelines for pesticide actions, recognizing that if we want to collaborate and harmonize, we must be doing things with the same performance target. Through this, we've identified many areas where the existing timeline was harmonized, and we are the 2 agencies are actively working to manage the differences in other submissions with different timelines, and we're doing this through our already established joint review program, where we can make adjustments and monitor how we could improve on timelines, or at least harmonize on these timelines. We have agreed to the content of the joint draft confidential statement of product specifications. That is a key piece of information which is a component of a pesticide application for registration, and it comes into both agencies. What we have been able to do is, by conducting a pilot, we have designed a new form. We haven't taken the existing forms and revised them. We have worked from the bottom up. We have a new form reflects the needs of both agencies, and we are currently conducting the pilot to populate this new form just to monitor and test that it works for both agencies. PMRA and EPA have begun discussions on the development of an electronic tool and a shared portal. We mentioned this at the same place as we mentioned the harmonized spec form, because, as most of you in the room will know, our applications to register pesticides come in an electronic form. We're not dealing with paper forms, so we may design the form in paper, but they must be developed into an electronic form, and hopefully we would have a tool to aid the review of that form and in a wizard format. So that is part of what we want to do in action item number 3. Also, we're currently mapping registration processes to further harmonize approaches and timelines. We're working on anticipating harmonizing business rules describing our fairly complex processes. And these business rules are going to be vital and, in fact, very necessary for us to work towards a joint information technology strategy in order for us to not only manage our registration processes, but, as I mentioned earlier, be a repository for our electronic forms. PMRA, EPA are also discussing opportunities for collaboration, including submission formats and forms on all other registration actions, and of course the product specification form is the first and the pilot for moving ahead. Action item number 4, and this is led by IR4 in the US and the Pest Management Centre in Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and I'll present on behalf of them. They are also making great progress with this action item. They have, the objective is to initiate pilot projects on development and the use of harmonized report templates. Number of these templates are listed here. Sorry, I've just caught up with the slide. First of all, the gap analysis has now been completed, and there is movement towards harmonization. The raw data field notebook, they're implementing harmonization where possible in time for the 2014 field season. IR4 and PMC are using the same template to record the analytical summary report, and a final report is due to be submitted soon or later this year to the EPA and the PMRA, and that will indicate all the pilot projects that have been completed this year using our standard OECD template. Still on action item number 4, we agreed to consider, the US have agreed to consider the Canadian priority projects in the US prioritization. Currently, both these activities go on separately in both countries, and then the growers work towards these priorities. The same will happen this time, I gather, but we will be making a real effort to consolidate these priorities. And they're currently dovetailing research. There were 18 joint projects in 2013, and this will involve outreach to Canada and US registrants, state and provincial representatives, and that will allow the identification of other potential joint projects for the future. Joint PMC IR4 registrant meetings. Joint meetings are taking place regularly, started in May and go to July for this year. And these joint meetings are being planned for 2014. And the IR4 PMC meeting in September to identify possible joint research projects for the coming year will take place. And the PMC and IR4 will also meet with PMRA and EPA to determine the joint work-share plan for the coming year. So cognizant of the time, the process for the next 3 months for ongoing alignment work, what we plan to do is to continue work on the tasks that are identified in the work plan. And of course, that has been modified slightly to include input from the stakeholder meeting, which was held in Ottawa in 2012. We have ongoing regular consultation opportunities to seek input on specific tasks. The next one coming up will be a webinar to seek information on the confidential statement of product specification forms. We should note at this point that we have found webinars to be one of our most successful ways through RCC to seek consultation on very specific projects. We will also continue to expand the opportunities for joint government, that EPA, PMRE, and joint industry Canada-US work planning meetings, the goal of which is to align our submission priorities wherever possible and move these submissions forward at the same time. So final slide, next steps and key issues. We will explore undertaking additional pilots where we're combining the expanded uses, adding more minor uses to the label, while at the same time setting the MRLs and import MRLs. And we are also exploring the possibility of expanding the scope of the project to consider a US-Canada information technology strategy. And our first focus there will be to look at the possibility of having a shared portal, shared databases, and to develop electronic tools, examples, wizard applications, to assist us in the easy back and forth of information and timely scientific review of our products. So with that, I guess we open the floor to questions from any of the panel. Thanks.
Any questions on the progress, nature of the activities? Yeah.
I would. Yeah, hi, I'm Charlotte Sanson with BASF. Thank you very much for the update. And last fall, the meeting that you mentioned, where you had stakeholder input and had an update on the overall progress, I thought was a really good overview and gave a lot of opportunity for stakeholder input. And there was some very productive and fruitful discussions. So I was just wondering if you're planning to do that again. I saw you mention further meetings. If you're looking at a big general overall meeting, or if you're looking at individual meetings that would address the individual objective areas.
Which is collaborating. We don't have any major consultations organized. Of course, if we need to have one and there is a need, we certainly would go forward. At the moment, we tend to have specific meetings around very specific parts of the action plan that have a deliverable associated with it. For instance, the specification form and some of the work on the development of IT tools and information sharing.
Anne Fowley, Canadian Horticultural Council. On your last slide, you referenced looking forward at new pilots. Do you have any products in mind? Are there opportunities for industry to suggest? Where might that be going?
Yeah, we've actually had interest, and so there are some products or some requests that we will look at, but obviously we're open to opportunities too. Because we normally would be looking at these applications, they just would come in as two applications and the pilot is one. So I guess, yes, we would be looking for people to signal if they would be interested in being another pilot.
I guess the other question I have too is, I mean, certainly when this whole initiative was announced, I mean, we were quite excited about it and certainly felt that this group in particular had almost a head start, if you will, because of the NAFTA Technical Working Group on pesticides. How has this helped move that along even more? Some of the differences that there had been in terms of processes or specific risk assessment and those types of things. Are we really kind of getting towards the light at the end of the tunnel on some of those things, so that notwithstanding the sovereignty issues and all those kinds of things, that we really will have a very much standardized system between the two countries?
Yeah, I think it complements the work in the NAFTA Technical Working Group for sure, but also help to spark or advance certain areas that we're working and expand into certain areas so we could focus on the minor crops and have some of that playing out. But I think the big part of where we were and where we're going that's different than NAFTA is the IT and the concept of being able to work together to coordinate our efforts in developing an IT system, which we think will enhance efficiencies as well as harmonization. And I think that's a significant area that we're piloting, as Marion described, with one concept, but using this as a platform to advance a new way of doing business.
Just to add, and I suppose just briefly, as you know, Canada and the United States have a very long-standing relationship in working together on crop protection products, but the RCC it's an opportunity to kind of sort of refine what you do, but I think as importantly, we've developed almost this operational working together on certain categories of submissions, for example, and this is an opportunity to really make sure we've got that sort of ongoing mechanisms in place. And I think the electronic environment is an area that we can really establish an infrastructure for that.
I'm Beth Law of the Consumer Specialty Products Association, and because we represent consumer pesticides, and the work plans, I think, are focused on ag products and crop products. I guess our particular interest is in the one, I think it was your last slide, Marion, dealing with the information strategy. Is that going, as you sort of develop that framework? I'm assuming, but that's why I'm asking the question. It will be all pesticides and wouldn't just be ag focused. Is that right?
Absolutely, Beth, because all submissions come into the same place, are dealt with in the same way, and leave in the same way. So there would be benefits across the board to all product lines from the IT solution. And also, if I could, Beth, some of the changes we've made with some of our submissions, albeit the focus was on the agricultural products and expanded uses. Some of the changes we've made in terms of process and in terms of aligning timelines have benefited consumer products. For example, because an example would be the reviews that have just got chemistry associated with them, amended reviews. We've looked at these timelines, we've looked at that process, so there's a benefit for product lines across the board, not just agricultural products. Okay. It's the knock-on effect, I think.
Well, our thanks to both agencies then. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Thank you. My name is Louise Roberge. I'm president of the Tea Association of Canada. I see that there are pilot projects, and the minor use is certainly very important. But as an import product, tea is an imported product totally in Canada. It is a minor crop in the U.S. Do you have any projects on totally imported products that come into the U.S. and Canada? If it's a totally imported product and one agency does all the data, what happens to the other country? I mean, I was just wondering if there are pilot projects on a totally imported product.
Well, actually, the pilot project that we did had some import tolerances, so we had some experience there, and we're trying to develop a process by which we could have just one review and then a peer review, since it's based on imported data. So we did get some experience on import tolerances in that, and MRLs in that pilot project.
Yep. Anyone else? Jerry, I think you had a question.
Jerry Barron, IR4 Project. Just one quick question, more of a 40,000-foot question, but do you have any strategies to implement the successful items you've done in, say, action item 1, like proportionality, globally? how can you get the rest of the world to agree on utilizing that area?
Well, as you know, Jerry, we have taken that both to OECD as well as we took it, played in a working group involving the Codex Committee on Pesticide Residues. So proportionality is being used now under a large number of circumstances. There are some exceptions by the joint meeting on pesticide residues, which then results in Codex MRLs. And then the OECD working group, with represented by a lot of the OECD countries, actually worked on the guidance that we ended up presenting to the Codex.
If I just add, I think there was a comment this morning around, if Canada and the United States really can't get together and sort of work this out together really well, we haven't got a lot of credibility internationally to influence proportionality internationally. So we're very much focused on making sure we can make it work.
This is Tanya Tochevo with Syngenta. Actually, I don't have a question. I'd like to thank on behalf of the NAFTA Technical Working Group here with my colleague John, who is chairing the NAFTA Technical Working Group from US, and I'm chairing from Canada. We'd like to really thank EPA agency, PMRA, and IR4 and Pest Management Center for all their hard work done on all the initiatives in all these 4 projects. And we certainly see a lot of successes, especially on the global joint review submissions. Actually, we're calling EPA and PMRA the powerhouse of the joint submissions, because they're really very knowledgeable in this area and helping other agencies to be involved in training them in this area. Certainly, the pilot project was excellent success, and probably this is a good opportunity for the companies just to start submitting these projects to harmonize the MRLs and adding more minor uses and harmonizing the labels as well. So thank you so much for all your contribution.
Okay.
I didn't want to just take somebody else had. A question around import tolerances and really around use of non-GLP data. I know that EPA maybe has a little more flexibility in what they're able to accept. I'll use the term GLP light, and sometimes this is creating a disconnect where we're not able to maybe make a joint submission or get an MRL established in U.S. and Canada. So it could create a disconnect. One example is with tea. Has been a recent example that I've experienced. Just something to think about or consider, not necessarily looking for a comment back.
Good, thanks. I suspect we're just about out of time. I think we probably have a next group coming in at 3.
If there are no further questions, this is probably a decent time to break. There is coffee, available coffee and tea at the back there, and they'll open up the doors in a couple moments, so we can do a transition between rooms. For those of you who are moving on to Agri-Food 2, that's back in this room again. Transport 2 is just down the hall, and downstairs is Health 2.
Thank you.